Investors are marking International Women's Day, promising a revolt against leading ASX companies with just one female director. Powerful shareholders are demanding business get serious about gender diversity or risk action, including votes against the re-election of male chairmen. The Council of Superannuation Investors, with $2.2 trillion under management, and State Street Global Advisors, which has $29 billion invested in Australian shares, are flexing their voting muscle. They're threatening to move against boards at annual general meetings that don't lift their game. It comes as the number of female CEOs in the ASX 200 drops from 14 last year to 11 this year. There are numerous estimates for when we'll reach pay parity. None of them, though, will be in the current workforce's lifetime. To discuss this, I'm joined by Rebecca Fender, the head of the Future of Finance Initiative at the CFA Institute in the USA, and Avril Henry, a leadership coach and author. Ladies, is that good enough to have pay parity not even within our lifetimes, Rebecca?
Certainly not, but it's really good to hear about the actions people are taking, right? And so we know that money talks, and the reason we've been focused on diversity in financial services is because diversity leads to better outcomes for investors. Diverse perspectives, we know that you need to think differently to beat the market, and so that's why having women at the table and listened to is extremely important.
Avril, your thoughts on the time frame?
Look, I've been studying the demographics around this for about 25 years and keeping track of it. And what I do know is if you look at the pay gap, in Australia, the pay gap has hardly moved in the last 3 decades. It's around 14.1%. But in some professions, it might be 5%. But in financial services, it's 29%. So I think this is a fantastic strategy because at the current rate of change, it'll take over 100 years before we have gender equity and pay parity. And for 15 years now, I have run my own super fund. And for the past 15 years, at every AGM, I have voted to keep all the female directors, and I have voted against keeping the male directors. So I think this is a great idea.
Yeah, this is something that I believe has been happening for a little while, and obviously you're an example of one of these people who's doing that. But is this something we're seeing internationally as well, Rebecca, that voters, shareholders are using their voice to have a say in this issue?
Certainly. The whole role of active ownership is growing. And so if you are going to steward your money, then you think about, okay, I have risk, I have return, and I have impact. So when I invest, how much does it reflect my values? You know, we talk about trying to get more women into the industry too. And how do we inspire women to join financial services? It's because if you really want to make a difference in this world, you can do it through this industry. You know, you see the buildings, the bridges, the things that are around your community, and that happens because of smart people financing things and making the world a better place. So we see in across the US and Canada in particular, large institutional investors, the pension funds there, really putting their money where their mouth is. And also, again, when we ask them, is gender diversity important for investment firms? Over half of them say yes, because I believe it leads to better performance. And another third of them say, you know, even if that weren't the case, that's where I want to put my money. I want firms with a good culture. And so when you have 80% of the most influential investors in the world saying this is important, firms need to listen.
Avril, you, as I mentioned, are a leadership coach and have worked in this space for a long time. You're obviously aware of the 30% Club that had that target of 30% of all board members being women in the top 200 companies listed in Australia. They've pretty much reached that at the end of last year. But has that actually developed or shown any real change?
In those organisations where there is a 30% representation of women on boards, if you have a look at them, many of them financially are performing better, they have higher levels of employee engagement, because it's not just about diversity of gender or diversity of age or diversity of racial background, it is also diversity of thought.
And I wonder if that feeds feeds into and some analysis that Citi has done that talks about the need for a pipeline within a company, rather than parachuting women into these leadership roles, actually creating that pathway for women who are more likely, obviously, to take time away from work, but ways that attract them to come back to the company and stay with that company. Do you think that companies are doing enough to do that, Rebecca?
Well, I think there's certainly more that could be done, but I'd also challenge the idea that it's only women that might take time out of the workforce, right? And so we talk about the importance of returnship programs, and that this is perhaps one of the most undervalued group in the marketplace, where people have excellent skills and have broadened their horizons through time away from the marketplace, and then we just don't quite know how to value that skill. So we think about returnship as the next generation is considering very different career paths. We know that people will have to change careers and types of jobs many more times in the future. There will be on-ramps and off-ramps, and that's actually beneficial in terms of different perspectives in the industry.
Do you have discussions along these lines with people that you speak to in business, Avril?
Absolutely. And when you start talking to people about the economic benefits of getting it right or the economic cost of getting it wrong and having a capable, competent workforce, then people start listening.
Avril Henry and Rebecca Fender, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.